be heard. Marijuana flower.
Glad that you decided to tune into the Highlights podcast with your host, Mike Spivey. We're back again. We're going to continue our little history lesson on cannabis in the world and cannabis as it comes down to the United States. Last time we were together, we discussed cannabis throughout Europe, the spread to Europe, the different countries that were involved with it in Europe, the things they learned about cannabis in Europe. Now we're going to take a focal point into the Western Hemisphere. And the reason why it was necessary to speak so much about the European continent and the different countries in the European continent is because the American culture is directly related to the European culture. And we're going to get into what we call colonization of the United States. Now, colonization, by definition, in the Merriam-Webster definition, is pretty much a group of people that come from another place, occupy a territory, but maintains alliance with the parent state or the parent country, however you want to put it. That's the Merriam-Webster definition, which is definitely befitting of what happened here in the Western Hemisphere that we call the Americas. So we're going to be clear about that. You gotta forgive me for saying a lot, because sometimes I get caught up in my thoughts and there's so many things running through my head at one time. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to deliver it, but I'm going to make a good effort to move away from that. As we get back into it, we're talking about colonizing. There was another definition that I found in Merriam-Webster, and I'm going to have to read this one because I can't remember it off the top of the head, but I loved it. When you get definitions from a dictionary, you get 1, 2, 3 different types of definitions for different applications of the word. But the one that actually made the most sense to me was colonizing, to infiltrate with usually subversive militants for propaganda and strategy reasons. This sounds totally applicable to the United States and their relationship with Britain. They sent the infiltrators in because American history didn't just start with Europe at that point in time. American history started with the Native Americans that were actually here before the Europeans got here. But for the purposes of hemp, we're going to definitely talk about the European influence on the cultures and how it actually got here. So keep banging with me. This is going to get real interesting. So we talked about what a colonizer is and what their function was and where they came from. So European colonizers spreaded cannabis throughout the world. But what we're going to talk about is specifically we're going to talk about the Americas, North America and South America, and how hemp made its way into those different places. So what we got to realize that since these Aryan traders who were Europeans left the Chinese continent and they had hemp with them and they've been carrying it around for years, took it to India, they realized all the different values that hemp has as an industrial textile. Textile is the key word in the situation. It was the textile industry that actually made European expansion even possible. They came over here with hemp sales. That's right, I said it. They came over here on hemp sales. So part of their expansion was moving around and having, whether they were the Spanish Armada moving around, the British Navy, they all had to have sales. They all knew the importance and the value of hemp. They knew that it was a multifaceted plant. They knew that it had nutritional value. They had value as a textile. And it also had a resinous value. So when Spain ventured out into South America, the first thing they tried to do was establish hemp. But the problem with Spain establishing hemp in South America was the climate. The same thing that happened in India happened in South America. A more resinous plant grew there. So therefore, the fiber wasn't as sturdy, so they couldn't really master hemp and feeding their need for the textile in itself to build its navy or Spanish Armada. I'm not sure. I might be saying it wrong, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Them ships that they used and whatever they call themselves. But for the most part, when we move into North America, we talk about the British. And, you know, part of the North American continent, you know, you have Mexico, you have the Americas, and you could say you have Canada. So the British pretty much dominated on the North American side of things. Like, you know, there's one little province in Canada, Quebec, which is French Canada. But for the most part, the British established the hemp industry in this country. As a matter of fact, it was the first tax that was levied on the country. The earliest colonizers ended up in Jamestown, and their initial tax was hemp. They had to produce 100 plants per family to send back to Europe. That's right, that was the actual tax, hemp. That's how valuable it was. It was a resource. Now, not to say that, you know, England wasn't grateful, but, you know, they do what they do as Europeans, you know what I mean? So they extracted the hemp from here and then sold hemp products back to the colonizers. So you can imagine how they, you know, felt in that situation. Now, I'm not saying, let's rewind for a second, that they were the only ones that could have brought it here, or because it could have very well had came with the Vikings, it could have came with the Moors, but we're gonna roll with the Europeans because they had the most influence over the American culture, the American cannabis culture. Everything is derivative of that relationship and how hemp actually got here. So where they get all of these talking points about they don't know much about the science of hemp, from what we learned up to this point, how could you not know anything about the science or the medicinal value of hemp when in 12,000 BC, Chinese agriculturalist farmers were listing the medicinal values of the plant in itself? So a lot of what we deal with in this country is kind of a farce, but I do get where they're coming from. It needs to be clinically tested and defined so we can know more about what we're going to do with cannabis. But that's no reason to say that it doesn't work or it doesn't have any medicinal value. All right. So we established that all the European colonizers were using hemp. That was their monetary tool to infiltrate the Americas. Plain and simple. When we focus on North America and we're talking about the British, a lot of we'll say the majority of the hemp that the British did receive, they got from Russia. Remember, early on in the earlier series, I talked about a Russian botanist who studied cannabis. Go back, check it out. So the Russians already had an established hemp trade, and they were selling hemp to Great Britain for their British Navy. Great Britain being a smart country in itself, hey, look, we got to cut our costs on this hemp. We buying this fine hemp from the Russian side. Why not just pimp our people out? That's right, I said it. They was pimping America. Why do you think there was a revolution? Okay? So yeah, they got pimped out. They got tired of being pimped and it was rebellion. But we ain't gonna go into that like that. So we just know that the British really wanted to break their ties with the Russians, and they were using the Americas to do that. And North America specifically was where they labeled and they put down these taxes to generate hemp. Like I said, on each family in Jamestown, which was the first settlement here, each family had to grow 100 plants. That was the tax levy that they had to give back to the parent country. Remember, they're colonizers. They have a parent country. So they had to support the economy there. And this just brings me to a curious point. It makes me wonder, like, when you're talking about cultivation and cannabis to this day right now, there's like a 99 plant maximum before you get to a level of really being incarcerated for a long time for the manufacturing and cultivation of hemp. Just something that I'm pointing out, because this 99 plant, just under 100 plant thing is something that was present, and it's a federal, we can't say there's any federal laws, but I just wonder if that's significant, and why they said 99 plants, just under 100 plant tax levy that was put on the original colonizers. Who knows? Just something to think about. But it worked out pretty well, and the British were really, how can I say, motivated to establish this. They even played Polish and Scandinavian agriculturalists to come and consult and teach colonizers how to grow hemp. That's how serious and committed they were from buying outside of their own means. Instead of, relying on Russian support, they were trying to rely on their own means outside of their country with their colonizers. And the prevailing thought is, basically they were getting over. But that's just part of conquering and moving on and taking over places and establishing economies of scale to support their efforts as well as support the people that was there. But I did mention in a previous segment that, it's kind of getting dirty with it, because the British was taking the hemp from the Americas, creating finished products, and sending stuff back. Second thought that's on my mind is when we talk about the colonizers and the early places that they, actually came into, a lot of those are part of the 10 states that have legalization of some sort. Yeah. Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Jersey. Thank you. That's Biggity Bangs there. You know that fly song that you be hearing, Shop With Me, at the beginning of my joint? That's Nephew Bangs who did that. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get a chance to meet him on a later episode. But Nephew Bangs is sitting in here with me while I'm doing this. You know what I mean? Ty Biggity, forever, you know what it is. But getting back to the point at hand, I'm going to just run down some digits for you.
Yeah. Feels good. Ty Bangs. I'ma tell y'all like a G told me, man. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Cheers to y'all. Clico spilling out the bottles on my niggas as stars. Equal signs for who we be and who we think that we are. Humbly, I turn it down, it's just my tendency with it. Cause truth could stand alone even if a lot come with it. Wouldn't expect most to understand, gotta go through the motions. Preparation